My guest today is Tony Agnesi. Tony's a Hall of Fame broadcaster. He's also a best-selling author. He is a master storyteller. He's the author of A Storyteller's Guide to a Grace-Filled Life, A Storyteller's Guide to Grace-Filled Life, Volume 2, and A Storyteller's Guide to Joyful Service, Turning Your Misery into Ministry. Tony also has one of the top 100 blogs in the Catholic world. I'm excited to have Tony on the show. Tony, it's great to have you on the show.
Jeff, thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be with you. It's nice getting to know you a week or so back, and it's really an honor to be with you here on the program.
Thank you. I've been looking forward to speaking with you. Some early questions here. How did you get involved in writing books and get involved with your podcast that you have?
Well, it's an interesting story. I grew up in a family of storytellers, Jeff. My grandmother and mother were both storytellers, and I became kind of a storyteller. It's how I communicate. And a lot of the consulting work that I've done and coaching work that I've done has always involved storytelling. And, Jesus was a storyteller in terms of the parables, and it was a way for him to communicate a message that was unforgettable because you remember the story. And so I've always been a storyteller. And over the course of the years, I've had people say, Tony, you need to write these stories down. You need to kind of document them in some way. And I always said, oh, maybe someday. But I was kind of turned off to writing in college. My freshman year of college, I got my first paperback in English class, and it had more red ink than black. And it had a great big F at the top. And it said, the professor wrote, "You'll never write above a fifth grade level." That's kind of a bad place to start when you're off to college. I made it through barely. I took basket weaving and 2 gym classes to graduate to get that 1.9 GPA up to a 2. But, the bottom line to the whole thing was it kind of turned me off to writing. So over the course of my career of consulting, many people said, you need to write some things down. And, I wrote a couple of things and I gave them to a retired a professor that I go to daily mass with, and she read them. And I said, what'd you think? And she said, Tony, they're marvelous stories. I said, well, more importantly, what level do I write at? And she said, 6th grade. So in 40 plus years here, Jeff, I'm up a grade. But
you advanced.
One of those stories was a story entitled When My Children Have Left the Faith. And it was a story I wrote for a brand new magazine called Shalom Tidings, which is a Catholic charismatic magazine out of Texas. And it was their debut issue. And it has been redone in church bulletins all across America, both Catholic and Protestant. And the idea was, many people that I come in contact with, when I'm out speaking around the country, when I'm done, I usually have people come up that want to get a book signed or whatever. And one of the things they always talk about, Jeff, is the fact that their adult children have left the faith, and that not only have they left the faith, but their grandkids haven't been baptized. And it really bothers devout Catholics. And I'm not talking about marginal Catholics here. I'm talking about men and women who are in the pews every Sunday and so forth, some daily mass goers whose children have kind of walked away from the faith. And for the most part, and although it's men and women, but for the most part, it's men that have just left the faith. And even if their wife is a churchgoer, they're kind of sitting at home as a couch potato, waiting for that 1 o'clock kickoff of the NFL game. And so, with my own family, I have two grown sons, and both have kind of shied away from the faith. My oldest would consider himself culturally Catholic. If somebody asked him, are you Catholic? Yeah, I'm Catholic. And he'll go to mass when mom's around, he'll take her and so forth. And my other son went off to a Christian college when he started college and just fell away from the faith. Your freshman year, you go to mass a few times on Sunday, and then there's that one Saturday night party, and you sleep in, and the next thing you know, you're going to St. Mattress of the Springs for your remaining college career, and that's kind of what happened there. And frankly, when I had grandkids, I wanted to be able to do something and call it leave a legacy, or however you want to phrase it, but that my grandkids would know that grandpa and grandma were Catholic, that we believed and were followers of Jesus Christ, and that a big part of our lives, a big part of the success of our marriage was rooted in our faith. And the only way I could think of, Jeff, to do that was to begin to document some of these stories and write them down. Now my grandkids are very young, 6 and 3, but the hope is that when they are old enough to read and consume them, that maybe they will find something in my writing that strikes a chord with them. And I'm leaving that part of it up to the Holy Spirit.
So that was your whole reason for writing the books?
Yeah, my first book is dedicated to my grandsons, with the idea that maybe we would leave them something that might be of value to them. Along the way, though, I just answered an email from a listener of one of the podcasts, who just made a comment about a podcast that I had just done called "Embrace the Ordinary." I did on Monday, and just a wonderfully written response. And so you realize that you can touch people with this. And I love the title of your show, because I'm just a regular Catholic guy. I make all the mistakes. I am far from a saint. I always kind of hearken it to a football game, and you've got referees that know all the rules, and we have that in our faith as well. We have guys with much higher degrees than I do, that know all of the rules. And then we have coaches, and I know a big part of your career has been coaching others, and I have loved coaching, not only coaching sports, which I've done in soccer and basketball, but also coaching and mentoring young people in my business. And so we've got those guys, and then we've got the players, right? Those are the guys that go offside and illegal procedure and do all of that. And in our Catholic faith, I'm that guy. I still make some mistakes along the way. I make quite a few, but I'm just trying to be a better guy than I was yesterday, and doing it with the love of Jesus Christ that I share, and my wife and I share together in our Christ-centered marriage. And hopefully I can get through to some younger men especially, that there are many, many, many joys that come from being the leader of a family, having a Christian marriage as it was intended to be. And the single biggest thing a man can do is to be a father, and to father his kids. And the statistics, as you know, Jeff, are not good when it comes to fatherhood. 40 million kids in the United States are growing up in a family without a father or father figure, or coach, or minister, or priest that is assuming that role, an uncle, a next door neighbor. And they say within a couple of generations, over half of all kids in the United States will be growing up without a man, without a father figure in their lives. And in the Black community, it's really even worse. It's epidemic. In the 50s, when I grew up, 80% of Black households had a father figure. And for the most part, and this may be a little bit of a generality, they were men of faith. They were men of strong faith. And now, 50 years later, 60 years later, it's 20% have a male figure in the household, 80% don't. And that ability to pass along faith to kids is not there. And it's at the root of many of the problems that we have today. The breakdown of the nuclear family and the lack of fathers are really, really a big part of the problems we suffer from today as a nation.
There's definitely a spiritual war out there, and it's been a war on the family.
It really has. It really has.
One of the things I didn't mention in the intro was you also have been involved in prison ministry for quite some time.
Yeah, this is I'm into my 16th year, although I only claim 15 because From about mid-February, Jeff, we have not been able to go in with COVID. They don't want anyone to come in who may possibly bring COVID into the jail or prison. So I have done some things from afar, and but some Zoom type things and so forth. But for the most part, we haven't been in. But yeah, I've been involved for over 15 years in jail ministry, and it's it's one of those ministries that you don't get a whole lot of feedback, but every now and then the Lord gives us a glimpse of something that may have happened that really it keeps you going. It keeps you motivated. And many of the stories in my books come from my experiences at the jail.
And I'm sure when we were talking about fatherhood earlier, you've seen this firsthand as far as the number of inmates that don't have fathers that they grew up with.
Oh, it's a huge number, Jeff. The guys, I would say it's upwards of 80% in sometimes in the jails. You'd be surprised the number of people I meet whose father is in prison. The father is in prison and they're in prison. It just kind of evolves that way that they get into that. And the kids without a father are more likely to be poor. They're more likely to get incarcerated because they learn their manhood on the streets rather than from a strong father figure. They're more likely to get involved in drugs and alcohol, and oftentimes that leads to incarceration. They're more likely to have teen pregnancies, more likely to have problems in school. All of these things just as a result of not having a father in the household. And so we see that the women in jail, oftentimes the only male figures in their lives are guys that are using them to get drugs or prostituting them to get cash and drugs and so forth. And many of these women have very, very low self-esteem as a result of not having a strong male figure that has their best interest at heart. That I look at some of my friends who have daughters and the relationship that these guys have with their daughters. These young women, want to find a guy just like dad to marry because they have that sense. And many of these women are deprived that because there is no father in the household. And so we see it all the time, and it leads to some of the problems we have with young people being incarcerated and getting involved with drugs and alcohol and so forth. Is it maybe not directly, but certainly a big contributing factor is there's no strong male figure in their lives.
What did you see as the faith life of the inmates?
It's amazing. Many of these guys come in to our classroom and they have no knowledge of Jesus, and grew up in households where religion wasn't part of it. Oh yeah, they've heard Jesus Christ, but they've heard it more as a swear word than they have our Lord and Savior. And so they're many times they come in very open to what we have to say, and and oftentimes we have to be very careful not to go over their heads. We talk in terms of the charisma, being able to tell them about Jesus, his life, his death, his resurrection, that he died for our sins, that we have forgiveness and we have justification and then we have salvation through Jesus Christ. And if you can get them to gather that in and comprehend it, then their appetite is insatiable to learn more. And you can hand them a Bible, but where do you start? And you can give them some articles to read, or Our Daily Bread, or some of these daily devotionals that are out there. And we use a lot of those. As a matter of fact, many of those daily devotional companies will give us copies either for free or at a very, very low cost, and we can distribute those. I've seen some of the most remarkable prayers in prison and in jails, Jeff. Just the prayers of inmates, I think, are touched especially through the Holy Spirit, and it is just it's just wonderful to be part of it.
Hmm. So, Tony, one of the things that I want to talk to you about today is I was going through your book, volume two of your book, and it was Friendship Deficiency and Male Friends. And as you were talking about that, I was just thinking about, okay, what type of friends did these men have before they went to prison?
Mm. Yeah, they met, most of them, they probably met on the street, in
Hmm.
a gang, or just guys walking the street, being guys, 12, 13, 14 years old, learning from guys who are, 15, 16, 17 years old, and not having that type of ability to have somebody kind of keep you in line or keep you accountable for things that you do. And that's really what I think friendship deficiency is in terms of men. The statistics, I don't have anything more recent than 2006, but in 2006, we found out that men had fewer friends than they did 20 years ago. They used to have three friends, and now they have two. I
Hmm.
can remember back in high school, we'd say, all you need are six friends, just enough for pallbearers. That was kind of a sad joke, but in many instances, that was it. You had, a
Hmm.
handful of friends. But we have high school friends, and a lot of guys will go off to college, and you've got your college buddies. But when college is over, one by one, they get married. And as you know, in our generation, they moved to all parts of the country. We used to be, right there in home where we grew up, and which is wonderful. But that, often we have to go where the work is and so forth. And so one by one, all of our college friends, are gone, and we're left with just our ourselves and our wife. And many men feel like they've got to go it alone, Jeff.
Hmm.
That to be strong, I have to go it alone, and so forth. And the truth of the matter is, nothing could be further from the truth. I had my time that I felt that way. My wife and I moved a couple of times for work, and moved to towns where we had no friends, and slowly made a couple of acquaintances and friends and so forth. But I felt that I had to do it on my own, and it wasn't until I got involved with the Cursillo movement. I don't know if you're familiar with Cursillo, but back in the 70s. And following Cursillo, we have an Ultrea group, which is a group that meets, and we had a bunch of guys that we get together over lunch on Wednesday. And there were probably 20 guys in the group, Jeff. And on any given Wednesday, 4 or 5 guys would be there. And
Hmm.
it was a great opportunity. And these guys would hold you accountable. And what have you been doing? Have you been attending mass? Are you, have you been going to confession? What are you doing? And it was a wonderful way, not only the accountability, but just to have someone to talk to other than your spouse. And again, there's nothing wrong with talking with your spouse, but oftentimes we need the perspective of another man to kind of give us a direction that might be helpful to us in our day-to-day struggles, just trying to get through. It really helps, somebody to talk to.
We haven't had anybody talk about the Cursillo movement on the show before. Do you want to explain that a little bit, Tony?
Yeah, back following, and this came as a result of Vatican II. We hear so much negative information about Vatican II. I have the documents of Vatican II sitting on the bookshelf behind me. They're wonderful. How they were interpreted sometimes, it may not be right, but they're wonderful. But coming out of that, we had a lot of guys that were not going to mass. I mean, especially in Europe, for example, women would go to mass and guys would go play soccer, go play football on Sunday morning. And gosh, I did that for years myself, and as a soccer player. And so in Spain, they began a movement to try to get men to come back to the church, and it was called the Cursillo movement, and it involved a 3-day weekend. And then your fourth day was the rest of your life, and that's kind of how it developed. And you would hear witnesses from other guys, guys your age, talking about their lives, sharing some of the experiences they've had, both negative and positive, why Jesus Christ became an important part of their life, and so forth. And over the course of those weekends, many, many men, myself included, return to the faith and return with a new vigor, Christ Renews His Parish and a lot of those other weekend retreats and so forth were all offshoots from the Cursillo movement. And my wife and I worked for a number of years with the Search program, Search for Christian Maturity, which is a weekend experience for young people, last couple of years of high school, first couple of years of college. And again, based on the principles of Cursillo. So many men that I know that are in their early 70s or late 60s were touched back then in the mid 70s by the Cursillo movement. And many of those men are very, very strong Catholics today. It gave way to a lot of very positive things that happened within the church.
And it allowed you to build a band of brothers.
Absolutely. You know, it's funny you mentioned we haven't talked about in a long time. That probably the first time I've talked with someone about Cursillo in years.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a very big part of my life.
And who did they make go to the retreats first, Tony?
The guys go first. I made Cursillo number 23 in Warren, Ohio. And my buddies, the guys that convinced me that we were going to go away to the high school gym and play basketball all weekend. That was they had rented the gym for the weekend. And when I got there, I found out that wasn't the case. I had kind of been tricked into going, but I thank God every day that I was. My wife, we moved to Atlanta, Georgia after my Cursillo, and my wife made Atlanta number 1, the first Cursillo in the Diocese of Atlanta. And she was, and you know, the team that came together that presented were from other places because there weren't really enough people to even form a team. So it was wonderful. My wife and I both made it. And shortly thereafter made Marriage Encounter as well, which again, another offshoot of Vatican II that people don't talk much about anymore.
Tony, you mentioned in the book that in this story that you have men that you meet at Mass and you go out to breakfast with.
Yeah, you know, I remember one day, I'll share a little story with the viewers and listeners. I'm sitting at Mass one day and I'm surrounded by 8 or 10 guys. And these are the guys that we, we go to daily Mass together. And then following Mass, we go out to breakfast or go out to coffee. As a matter of fact, we have a schedule. We know exactly what restaurant on what day of the week we're going to go to and so forth. And they're guys of all sorts. They're younger guys, they're older guys, there are retirees, guys in their 90s, guys in their 60s. And we come from all walks of life. We have guys that are in insurance and guys that were in medical sales, and myself in the broadcast industry. We have, trainers and just a variety of guys. We all have our particular expertise. And as I'm sitting there thinking about it, it reminded me of a trip that my wife and I made for our 25th wedding anniversary 23 years ago to Italy with our 2 then high school age sons. And we were in Lake Como, which is in northern Italy. And my wife and kids were off doing something. And I just kind of wandered off myself and got on a cable car and went to the top of a mountain. And it was a town called Brunetta. And as I got off the cable car and was walking along the mountain, a bunch of older men were sitting, literally playing cards with a deck of cards, Jeff, that the spots were worn off. That's how how many games of cards they had played, drinking wine, eating pizza, and playing cards. And they immediately invited me over. Now, they don't know me from a bag of rocks. And here I am, this English speaking American, and they invited me in their broken English. And I responded in my broken Italian and ended up hanging out with those guys for 30 minutes or maybe a little bit longer, because my wife complained, where have I been for such a long period of time? But it reminded me of that. These guys immediately drew other men in. That there is this circle of men, and I don't know if it's a European thing or whatever, old world thing, but that's missing a lot here in the U.S. And so these guys, we actually organized ourselves into a group called Fools for Christ from 2 Corinthians. We are Fools for Christ. And golly, Jeff, if you met a few of these guys, you'd say, yeah, that's the perfect name for this group is Fools for Christ. And we get together, and not only have we gotten together at breakfast and at daily Mass, but we've put on We put on men's retreats together and days of recollection for men and so forth. I think we're up to 6 or 7 of those that we've done over the course of the last, half dozen years. So it has been a wonderful group of guys that you can not only have fun with, talk football with, and so forth, but are more than likely we're going to end up talking about Jesus. We're going to end up talking about faith. We're going to end up talking about how that faith guides us. And if one of the guys is having a particular problem, and we've had guys with major health issues and so forth, he knows that there's a bunch of guys that are going to surround him, that are going to stand for him, that are going to back him up, drive him if he needs taken to a medical appointment, whatever that takes. And it's such a great feeling to know that you have men in your life that can do that.
Mm-hmm. How did you get involved with that group of men, Tony?
Well, it started out, there was a program called Familia. I don't know if you're familiar with Familia, but some of these guys were going to a Familia group, and I began going. And so we had 2 different Familia groups. And what we discovered with Familia, which is a wonderful program, is it talks an awful lot about young fathers and raising kids. And we were a bunch of older guys. And so when that particular session ended, we kind of went off on our own and formed a group. And that led way to a Wednesday night prayer group that we get together on Wednesdays to pray together, to pray for each other, to pray for our families, to pray for people in the parish and so forth. And it's been a wonderful experience as well. And that's kind of how it came together. It was 2 or 3 other groups that had either finished or disbanded, and we kind of pulled them all together under one roof, and it has been remarkable.
That's interesting, because there's a group of men that I get together with, and some of them came out of a Familia group as well.
Is that right? That's great. That's a great story.
It is. Yeah, I think it's so important as men to have other men that share the faith that you hang out with, or that you meet with, go to breakfast once a week, go have a beer with maybe once a month with that group. Because what do guys usually talk about? We talk about sports, we talk about the weather, we talk about work, politics.
But not God, not faith.
Religion, it's not faith. It's faith. You just don't talk about it, right?
Yeah. You don't talk about faith or what political party you're a member of or whatever, unless that's well known. But we oftentimes, guys, when you start a new job, one of the things that has helped me is to try to find a couple of guys at work that are like-minded, that share some of our same interests, that, and maybe you have lunch with them and find out if they've got anything, or if they're a member of a group or something that, that they've done in the past. Or I think we have to be proactive at church, by joining men's groups or prayer groups or Bible studies. And I think, Jeff, and I'm sure you would agree, that it's incumbent upon us to go invite guys,
Absolutely.
One of the guys, Dick, who's in my prayer group, says, we got to go belly to belly. You got to go out there and say, hey, Jeff, we'd love to have you on Wednesday night. Why don't you come join our group? Come once, see if you like it, and whatever. Right. And just, I think a lot of people wait to be invited. They wait to be invited. And a lot of guys out there just waiting for somebody to invite them. And I think if we did that more often, I think we would be surprised at how many guys would say, yeah, I'd like to get involved that way. And then find out a few months later that they're a regular attendee, and that you have begun to have that the other guys have a relationship with the newer guy who he feels he trusts them. And we open up when we trust someone, and I think it takes that kind of a friendship for somebody, especially for a man, to feel comfortable opening up about his problems, that he's supposed to handle on his own, and doesn't need any help. And then reaching out to old friends sometimes. When COVID hit back in March, one of the things I did was I came up with 5 people I want to talk to, 5 things I want to accomplish, 5 people I want to pray for, and what had ended up happening is I began to get on the phone every day and call people I hadn't talked to in years. Oh, high school buddies, people at churches when I lived in other cities, guys that I knew. And the interesting thing about that, Jeff, is not a single guy kind of shut that out. It was a, hey, how you doing? I was just thinking about you. And you'd end up having these marvelous conversations. That led way to me hosting a Zoom for, I think we had 20 on the first one and 22 or 23 on the second Zoom call of my high school graduating class. And we got people all over the country just sitting on Zoom and sharing all of the old high school war stories, our 1-9 football team and all of those things. And it was marvelous. And so to be able to do that, and then to think of 5 people I wanted to pray for every day. And, you never run out of people to pray for. I learned that from an old friend in the broadcast industry named Rona. She was a 3-time cancer survivor, Jeff. And she did a thing called the 3 o'clock call. Every day at 3 o'clock, she'd drop whatever she was doing and call someone. And someone that was sick, someone that had down on their luck, had just lost their job, whatever the circumstances. And I remember asking her at one time, do you ever run out of people to call? And she says, Tony, never. There's always somebody that can use a phone call. And in my book, in my first book, we talk a little bit about the little prayer that I pray in the morning. Lord, make me an instrument. Put somebody in front of me today that you can help through me. I'll be your eyes, ears, arms, legs. But you put somebody in my path today that you can help through me. And that wonderful prayer happens 100% of the time, and people always present themselves and you can help a number of people. One of my talks is called A Life of Predictable Miracles. And you can have a life of predictable miracles if you just open to the Holy Spirit, say, Lord, use me, put up the antenna. And it's amazing how that works. And guys have got to get out of the house too. You can't just be doing video games and watching football and so forth. You got to get out and do some things. And I'm not downgrading the fact that, my wife is my best friend. But boy, it's great to have some guys that I'm friends with as well.
I think that's important, Tony, is that men do have friends outside just their wife. And it is harder today, like you mentioned when we first started talking, and it's even harder because of COVID to be out and about.
Yeah.
In some of our states, we have listeners that they're still pretty locked down. So it can be a challenge, but they can certainly pick up the phone and call people. You can do a Zoom call like you talked about and stay connected.
And it's the same thing. There's a couple of older guys in our group. One guy in particular in his 90s, and he may be compromised in some way, and he's very careful. And hey, you pick up the phone. Hey, do you need any groceries? What can I, can I run and get something for you? What can we do? We're not talking about anything major here, Jeff. We're just talking about saying, hey, we're buds, and is there a way I can help you to getting through this? And you and I talked a while back about iron sharpening iron. I think you said you have a group of guys getting together and you're using that name, which I think is fantastic. That is a real plus. When you take a dull knife, it's still a knife, but when it's sharpened, it cuts better. It's brighter. It's fit for use and so forth. And I think the same holds true for guys. A man going it alone is still a man. But he's dull like that unsharpened knife, and he could be inactive, and he could be suffering from depression or anxiety. He could be just suffering from a job loss or something that happened at work and so forth. And he needs to have that knife sharpened. He needs to, have the sharpening effect of the iron of another guy sharpening that iron. Two similar knives can't sharpen each other. We need somebody, somebody else that can help and do that.
And Tony, if you don't have that group of men and you run into those hardships of life, whether that be job loss, like you talked about, whether that be an illness or just something happens to where you get out of the habit of going to mass, if you don't have a group of men that are Christ centered, it's easy just to get out of the habit and say, well, I just
That's
won't go
that.
this
That's that.
weekend. I won't go next weekend,
Mhm.
or I won't
That's that
watch it on
accountability. That's that
TV.
accountability issue. That's the accountability issue. To have a guy saying, "Hey, Jeff, I looked over at the fourth pew down on the left, and I didn't see you there. I saw your family, but I didn't see you there, Jeff. Where were you?" And
Mhm.
put him on the spot there for a minute, and just to see. Yeah, we can slip. I mean. We can easily slip. One of the things with COVID that worries me the most, Jeff, and I think we talked about this off air, is that so many people now, because they're watching mass on their computer, um, or on their phone or whatever, and are not actually going to mass, not receiving the Blessed Sacrament. That as more and more weeks, and now almost 8 months go by, getting some of those people back into the pews is going to be a challenge.
Mhm.
And once you get used to not going, it's just like that kid in college after that first big Saturday night party. And that morning he lays in bed and goes, maybe I won't go this week. Well, that turns into weeks, and then that turns into months and years. And then generally speaking, it takes something major to bring him back. And what we used to see over the years, and this is sadly not the case, is a lot of guys, when they got married, would come back to the church. Or certainly if they had kids and they started wondering what compass they were going to give their kids to lead their lives, would come back and excuse me, have their kids raised in the faith and so forth. The problem is that doesn't happen anymore, that when they leave, they don't come back as our generation did, and even a generation after us did. The newer generation, 51%, according to the studies, of people under the age of 30, when asked their religious affiliation, say none. And that's not Catholic. They're not hustling off to some evangelical church. They're not turning Buddhists. They just say none. And so they have no compass on how to lead their lives, and they have no spiritual guidance to call upon when I can't do it alone. They have no one that they can call upon like we can, to call upon our Lord to be there for us, and He will never, ever forsake us.
Tony, I was that college guy that didn't get up after the big party and missed a week, missed another week, missed another week. And then after that just became Christmas and Easter because I'm at home. And it wasn't until I met my wife that I actually came back to the church.
Mm-hmm.
So I can appreciate that story of falling away and that habit. And like we talked about with COVID, it does scare me that there are men out there, families that could not come back just because it becomes a habit
Yeah,
of not
yeah.
going.
Once you make the habit of not going, you've got to break that habit, to get back. And I think one of the biggest untalked about problems today, Jeff, that our church faces is the fact that young people are leaving the church. The second largest Christian denomination in America is lapsed Catholics or
Right.
former Catholics and so forth. And boy, if we could just touch those people and get them back into the pews, how much stronger our faith community would be, and how much easier it might be to evangelize those that have no faith. And, you know, when I wrote that article that we talked about at the beginning of the show, when my children lost the faith, a lot of people responded to that, because I gave some thoughts on that, and not solutions, because boy, I'm still short of solutions myself, but some things that I learned in my own experience that maybe I could pass along here that might help some people who are, people that have adult sons, daughters
Mhm.
who have left the faith, who have grandkids that are not being raised in the faith, not receiving the sacraments of initiation, baptism, confirmation in the Eucharist, and so forth. Well, let me give you 6 things that I've learned. One is don't argue with them. One of the worst things you can do is argue with them, because it simply pushes them farther away. You can't outwit them or outshout them into doing what you want them to do as a parent. I have one particular argument that I wish I could take back that did more harm than good. And I think the second thing, which I think is the most important thing for us, is that we should remain faithful. Don't let their falling away affect or discourage our faith or make us suppress our beliefs. When I travel and it's Sunday, I'm going to go to mass. Sorry, you'll see you in an hour or two when I get back. In Exodus 26, we read, bestowing mercy down to the 1,000th generation on the children of those who love me and kept my commandments. So for guys like you and me, Jeff, we love our Lord, keep his commandments, and he will bless our generations. In Sirach 44:13, we read, and for all time their progeny will endure, and their glory will never be blotted out. So that's our responsibility, is to remain faithful, to have them at some point in time say, boy, I wish I had what Jeff has. And when they ask you, you can certainly share it with them. Acts 16:3 says, what must we do to be saved? And they said, if you believe in the Lord Jesus, you and your household will be saved. Isn't that great? Doesn't that give us some consolation that the Lord wants everyone to be saved? He wants everyone to be saved, and that all we can do oftentimes as parents and grandparents and so forth is to remain faithful ourselves. The other thing that I pray for, and pray for a lot, is that the Lord brings someone else into their lives that can help them, that we must trust God to do it. My wife is a big fan of St. Monica, and she prayed for St. Augustine for, I don't know, it was 30 years or something like that. But it wasn't until he met St. Ambrose, who was the Bishop of Milan, and St. Ambrose was the one that got to him, out-rhetoricked him, and more experienced than him, and brought him back to the faith. So what did Monica do? She prayed, and she prayed for someone to intervene, and St. Ambrose did. And then I think
she loved him the whole time.
What's that?
And she loved him the whole
time.
Oh,
she loved him. And again, I'm glad you mentioned that. And never gave up. Loved him the entire time. We need to study and learn our faith. We need to get a little more, we need to know a little bit more about our faith ourselves. Hard to defend the faith, Jeff, when you don't know enough about it. And, there are some guys younger than you and I. The Catholic Church didn't have a catechism in English from the end of the Baltimore Catechism with Vatican II till 1993. We had this big gap. And I know people who grew up in that gap in their late 40s and even into their 50s who didn't get the kind of catechesis that I got with who made me, God made me, why God, that we got from the Baltimore Catechism. And so many of them have false notions about things. I remember one particular story. I was talking to one of the women I work with, and she was kind of interested in the faith. And she asked me a little bit about the Catholic faith. And she was most interested in the Eucharist, in communion, and what that represented. And, and we talked a lot about the Eucharist as the source and summit of our faith, the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist and so forth. And when we finished our discussion, around the corner came another guy who worked there, who had gone to Catholic grade school, Catholic high school, and a Catholic college. And he goes, I didn't know that. I thought it was just symbolic. So there you have it. So we need to learn our faith better. Always be ready to give an explanation, right? As it says in 1 Peter. And love them. You brought that up. Don't push them away. Love them more than ever. Make it a point to tell them you love them. Let them see your joy. Let them see your happiness, and make them want, what you have. Those are some things. Now, are those the answer? I don't know, but those are at least a few things we can try and that I try to assure us that the Lord, who wants everyone to go to heaven, will work in some way in all of their lives. And I kind of came to the realization that the one person that isn't going to bring them back is mom and dad. It's going to take the intervention of someone else, and that's okay. We'll just continue to pray and love them.
And I think, Tony, too, one of the things that comes into play is, I know when I was in college, if I would have had 2 or 3 buddies that went to church and prodded me a little bit to go with them, I would have never
probably
left.
gone.
Yeah.
You'd have probably gone. That's true. Absolutely true.
So there's nothing like having good, solid male friendships that are true to the faith.
Mm-hmm.
Keep that iron sharpening iron, as you talked about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Tony, how do people get in touch with you and obtain your books?
Yeah, they can get in touch with me if they go to TonyAgnesi.com, TonyAgnesi.com. And what they're going to find there is they're going to find all of my books. And I want to offer a special offer to anybody watching or viewing on the books. They'll find out if they'd like to book me at their church or their men's group or whatever to speak. I'm available to do that. They'll find my 5 Minutes with Tony podcast, which is in video form now. We have 34 of them. We do 2 a week on Monday and Thursday. My radio program is called The Storytellers, and you can get a link to The Storytellers from my website, thestorytellersradio.com. It's now in TV version as well. And you'll see my daily grace posts, which are my daily quotes that we post. And there's over 300 blog posts and podcasts. We call them a snackable podcast. They're all 5 minutes or less because I can't write more than 700 words at a time. So they're all there on the website. And my YouTube page is youtube.com/Tony Agnesi. All of my video product is there. Everything is there. And I want the listeners and viewers to know that in my ministry, in my apostolate, if you will, I take no money. So all of the speaking fees, all of the book sales, everything, after we pay the expenses to print the books and do everything beyond that is money that my wife and I donate to charities, to some of the ministries we support, like the Embrace Clinic and Care Center, which is the local pregnancy center, like Catholic Radio, which I'm on the board of Living Bread Radio, who produced the radio version of my show, and so forth. So we take that money. It gives us an opportunity to donate more money than we normally could, to those charities from all of the proceeds of my apostolate.
That's awesome. We'll include all that in the show notes as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Tony. It was great to have you on the show.
Great to be here. Let me make an offer here, Jeff.
All right.
I have 3 books. I have 3 books, A Storyteller's Guide to a Grace-Filled Life, and I have A Storyteller's Guide to a Grateful Life, Volume 2, and A Storyteller's Guide to Joyful Service, Turning Your Misery into Ministry. You can get all 3 books on my website. It's in the bundle. If you go to the store, the bundle is normally $30, and if you put in the promo code FRIENDS, FRIENDS, $20 in free shipping. That's like buying a book and a half and getting the other book and a half for free. So the reason is a lot of my talks got canceled because of COVID. We have a lot of books here, so I like to just kind of move them a little bit. So we're offering a barely break-even price, and we're going to free ship them as well. Use the promo code FRIENDS in the store at TonyAgnesi.com.
And I can tell you, you're going to love the stories.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jeff.
God bless, Tony.
God bless you. It's been great being with you.